On what should have been the happiest day of her life, betrayal loomed on the horizon. How far would you go to reclaim your dignity and strength? Join us as we unveil Mia's journey from heartbreak to triumph. The morning sun filtered through the delicate lace curtains of the bridal suite, casting a golden glow across the room. Mia stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting the folds of her wedding dress. The creamy fabric fit her perfectly, its surface adorned with intricate hand-sewn beads that sparkled softly in the light. She tilted her head slightly, checking the way her veil cascaded over her shoulders. It was exactly what she had envisioned, yet an inexplicable heaviness pressed on her chest, a shadow darkening the perfection of the moment. "Girl, you look like an absolute queen," her best friend Camille exclaimed, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "If Daniel so much as hesitates at the altar, I'll drag him there myself." Mia managed a small laugh, but it sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Normally, Camille's playful teasing would lift her spirits, but today it barely scratched the surface of her unease. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, and the nagging anxiety that had gripped her since the rehearsal dinner refused to let go. Daniel, her fiancé, had seemed distant the night before. His tension had been palpable, his usually warm demeanor replaced with distraction. And then there was his mother, Olivia. She hadn't bothered to hide her disapproval of Mia's family or the personal touches Mia had worked so hard to include in the ceremony. "Hey," Camille's voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "What's going on? You've been staring at that mirror for 5 straight minutes. Are you getting cold feet?" "No," Mia replied quickly. "It's not cold feet. She trailed off, struggling to put her feelings into words. "I want everything to be perfect. This day has to be perfect." Camille raised an eyebrow knowingly. "Is this about Olivia? Because if she even tries to pull something today, I swear." "Don't," Mia interrupted, raising a hand to stop her friend. "It's not worth it. She's traditional. Daniel keeps telling me she'll come around eventually." "Traditional is a generous word for it," Camille muttered under her breath. "Rude is more like it." Mia let out a faint smile but said nothing. Instead, she ran her hands down the front of her dress, grounding herself in the fabric's smooth texture. The truth was, Olivia's disdain wasn't the only thing bothering her. At the rehearsal, she had caught Daniel whispering with his PR agent. She hadn't overheard much, but his distracted demeanor had left her with a gnawing sense of unease. Was this wedding truly about their love, or was it part of his career-driven strategy? A sharp knock at the door startled Mia from her thoughts. Camille moved to answer it, revealing Daniel himself standing in the doorway. His tailored suit fit him like a dream, and his smile, the same one that had stolen her heart, lit up his face. But the stiffness in his jaw and the tension in his posture made her stomach churn. "Can I talk to you for a second?" he asked, his eyes meeting Mia's. Camille crossed her arms. "You know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, right?" Daniel chuckled lightly, but there was no humor in it. "I think we'll survive. Just a minute, I promise." Reluctantly, Camille stepped aside, grumbling under her breath about superstitions as she left the room. Daniel closed the door behind her and turned to Mia. His eyes swept over her from head to toe. "You look amazing," he said finally, his voice soft, "truly stunning." "Thank you," she murmured, though his words didn't reach the growing knot in her chest. "What's wrong?" He hesitated, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's my mom. She's not thrilled about the broom jumping tradition." Mia's heart sank. "Not thrilled?" she echoed. "Daniel, it's a tradition. It's important to me." "I know," he said quickly. "And I get that. I really do. But she thinks it doesn't quite fit the vibe of the ceremony. You know how she is about appearances." A flicker of anger ignited within her, but she fought to stay composed. "So what are you saying? That we should just cut it because it makes her uncomfortable?" "I'm saying maybe we can find other ways to honor your culture," he replied, his tone cautious. "Ways that don't stand out as much." The words struck her like a blow. She had spent months crafting a ceremony that reflected both of their heritages, blending their lives into one harmonious celebration. And now, mere hours before the wedding, he was asking her to erase a part of herself to appease his mother. "I see," Mia said quietly, turning back to the mirror, her face a mask of calm as her heart shattered within her. Turning back to the mirror, Mia let out a slow breath, her chest tightening. "Mia, come on," Daniel said softly, stepping closer. "It's just one small thing. Don't let it ruin the day." She didn't respond, too afraid that if she spoke, her voice would betray the storm brewing inside her. Daniel sighed, pressing a light kiss to her cheek. "You'll be amazing out there," he said, his tone rehearsed. "I'll see you at the altar." As the door clicked shut behind him, Mia released the breath she'd been holding, her hands trembling. The weight of her wedding dress felt unbearable now, each carefully sewn bead a reminder of the cracks forming beneath the surface of her day. Camille burst back into the room almost immediately, her sharp eyes narrowing as she took in Mia's pale expression. "What did he say?" Mia shook her head, forcing a faint smile. "Nothing, it's fine." But it wasn't fine. Not even close. The ceremony itself unfolded like a picture-perfect dream, at least to the onlookers. The sun bathed the outdoor venue in a warm glow, the flowers were vibrant and fragrant, and the soft melody of a string quartet floated through the air. Mia, however, felt like she was floating outside her own body. As she walked down the aisle, she couldn't help but notice the way Daniel's relatives avoided her gaze. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and she caught sidelong glances exchanged between his family members. Reaching the altar, she took Daniel's hands, but his grip was cold, almost mechanical, like the motions of a man performing rather than living the moment. The vows were brief and polished, practiced to perfection. When the officiant paused to ask if anyone objected to the union, Mia's heart pounded in her chest, half expecting Olivia to rise and protest. But the silence stretched on, and the ceremony moved forward, though not without a glaring omission: the broom-jumping tradition, which was never acknowledged. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Daniel leaned in to kiss her. The crowd erupted into applause, and for a fleeting moment, Mia allowed herself to believe everything might be okay. But as they turned to face their guests, her eyes locked with Olivia's. The older woman's smile was thin, calculated, and it sent a chill down Mia's spine. This wasn't over. The reception hall was stunning, a display of grandeur that felt almost blinding. Glistening chandeliers illuminated the room, casting a golden light over tables adorned with immaculate linens and lush floral arrangements. Guests laughed and mingled as servers navigated the space with trays of champagne flutes. Mia stood near the entrance, offering polite smiles as people congratulated her, but her thoughts were a whirlwind. Daniel, meanwhile, had been glued to his phone since the ceremony ended. Every time she glanced at him, he was either typing furiously or murmuring in hushed tones with his PR agent, a man who, to Mia's dismay, had somehow been invited to the wedding. Her mother approached, her warm smile a balm to Mia's frayed nerves. "Are you okay, baby? You look tense." Mia forced her smile to widen. "I'm fine, Mama. Just a lot going on." Her mother's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't press. Instead, she placed a comforting hand over Mia's. "You look beautiful. Don't let anything ruin this moment." Mia nodded, but the words rang hollow. She watched as her mother returned to her table, where her family laughed and chatted with ease. The stark contrast to Daniel's relatives, who sat stiffly exchanging whispers, was undeniable. At a table near the dance floor, Olivia presided like a queen surveying her court, her eyes darting toward Mia every so often with thinly veiled judgment. The DJ's voice boomed over the speakers, announcing the couple's first dance. Mia's stomach dropped as she realized Daniel wasn't by her side. Scanning the room, she found him at the bar, engrossed in yet another conversation with his PR agent. She took a steadying breath and walked toward him, the sharp click of her heels swallowed by the chatter around her. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but firm, "it's time for our first dance." He looked up, startled, before nodding quickly. "Of course. Sorry about that." They moved to the center of the dance floor, and as the opening notes of their song filled the room, Mia placed her hand in his. For a fleeting moment as they swayed, she tried to let herself relax, leaning into him. But as the dance continued, she couldn't ignore the stiffness in his movements or the way his eyes scanned the crowd, as if performing for an audience rather than sharing an intimate moment with her. When the song ended, applause erupted around them, but Mia's unease only deepened. She glanced at Daniel, who was already pulling out his phone again. The knot in her stomach tightened. This day, her day. felt like it wasn't about their love at all. The applause filled the room as the first dance ended, and Mia forced a smile as she turned to acknowledge the guests. Daniel stepped back almost immediately, already retrieving his phone. Her stomach churned, but she maintained her composure, thanking the crowd and moving toward their table. Waiting for them was Olivia, her smile sweet but her words sharp. "Lovely dance, dear," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "Though I couldn't help but notice your posture. A bit stiff, wasn't it?" Mia opened her mouth to reply, but Daniel cut her off. "Mom, let's not nitpick. It's her day." Olivia raised an eyebrow but said no more, gliding away to mingle. Mia felt a flare of anger ignite in her chest and turned to Daniel, her voice low and controlled. "You're just going to let her talk to me like that?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She didn't mean anything by it. Don't make a scene." Her anger simmered beneath the surface, but she swallowed it down. This wasn't the time or place. As the evening progressed, Mia felt increasingly alone. Daniel was constantly pulled away by his PR team, and Olivia seemed intent on keeping Mia at arm's length from the rest of the family. Even when Mia tried to engage with his relatives, their responses were cold and dismissive, their smiles tight and fleeting. At one point, while passing the buffet table, Mia overheard Olivia speaking to a group of guests. "She's lovely, isn't she?" "Of course. Daniel has always had a heart for charity work. I suppose this is just another example." Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Charity work? The mix of humiliation and fury rose within her, but she forced herself to keep walking, refusing to let Olivia see her falter. She nearly collided with Camille, who was holding a glass of wine and wearing an expression sharp enough to cut glass. "I heard her," Camille said flatly. "Want me to handle it?" "No," Mia said quickly, her hands trembling. "It's not worth it." Camille's gaze lingered, doubtful. "You sure about that?" Mia nodded, though her resolve felt fragile. "Just let it go." The final blow came during the speeches. Olivia took the microphone, her smile thin and her voice oozing with false charm. "I just want to say how proud I am of my son," she began. "Daniel has always been so generous, so willing to give back to those less fortunate, and now he's extending that generosity to his choice of bride." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Mia's chest tightened as all eyes turned to her. She glanced at Daniel, hoping for some sign of support, but he stared down at his plate, avoiding her gaze entirely. When the speech ended, the applause was polite but muted. Mia excused herself, slipping out onto the balcony. The cool night air hit her like a slap, and she gripped the railing, her breaths shallow and uneven. How had this day, meant to mark the beginning of a beautiful life, turned into such a nightmare? The door opened behind her, and she turned to see Daniel stepping out. "Mia, what are you doing out here?" he asked, his tone tinged with exasperation. She crossed her arms, her voice trembling. "I needed a moment," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I know my mom can be difficult, but—" "She called me a charity case, Daniel," Mia said, her voice breaking. "In front of everyone." "She was joking," he replied dismissively. "Don't take it so seriously." She stared at him, disbelief and hurt colliding within her. "You're really going to defend her after that?" "I'm not defending her," he said, his tone growing impatient. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Can we not do this right now? We still have guests to entertain." Something inside Mia broke. Without another word, she turned and walked back into the hall, leaving him standing alone on the balcony. The breaking point came during the cake cutting. As they posed for photos, Olivia made another cutting remark, this time about Mia's family not contributing much to the wedding. Mia froze, the knife trembling in her hand. She looked at Daniel, silently pleading for him to step in. He laughed nervously. "Mom, maybe save that for later," he said, brushing it off. The words hung in the air, and in that moment, Mia realized she was alone in this marriage. Daniel wasn't her partner. He was Olivia's son through and through. When the cake cutting ended and the guests resumed mingling, Mia pulled Daniel aside. "We need to talk," she said firmly. "Not now," he replied, glancing at his phone. "I'm handling something." "No," she said, her voice unyielding. "Now." He sighed and followed her to a quiet corner. "What is it?" "This," she said, gesturing around them. "Your mother's comments, your family's behavior, your constant phone calls. None of this feels like a wedding. It feels like a performance. and I'm starting to think I'm just part of the act. This, Mia said, her voice trembling as she gestured around the grand reception hall. Your mother's comments, your family's attitude, your constant phone calls, none of this feels like a wedding. It feels like a performance, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm just part of the act. Daniel's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. That's ridiculous. Is it? Mia shot back, her tone sharper now. Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't feel ridiculous at all. His voice dropped to a whisper, harsh and controlled. You're being dramatic. Stop making a scene. Her voice quivered, a mixture of anger and heartbreak. I'm not the one making a scene. Your mother humiliated me in front of everyone, and you just sat there. You did nothing. That's enough, Daniel snapped, his voice rising. You're ruining this night. Before she could respond, his frustration boiled over. In a moment that froze the room, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The hall went silent. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. The DJ stopped the music. All eyes turned toward them. Mia's cheek burned, both from the stinging slap and the humiliation. Her mind raced to comprehend what had just happened as she raised a hand to her face. Daniel's expression shifted from anger to horror as the weight of his actions hit him. Mia, he began, his voice faltering. She didn't let him finish. Turning to the crowd, her voice was steady despite the tears pooling in her eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her tone icy and resolute. This wedding is over. Without another word, Mia walked out of the hall, leaving behind the man she thought she loved and the family that had tried to break her spirit. The cool night air hit her like a slap as she pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the parking lot. The faint murmur of shocked voices drifted out behind her, but she didn't stop. The weight of her wedding dress dragged against her, suffocating, as if it were a cruel reminder of the day's nightmare. Behind her, the hall doors opened again. She heard hurried footsteps and then Camille's voice calling out, Mia? Wait. Mia slowed but didn't turn around. She couldn't face the pity she knew would be in her best friend's eyes. Camille caught up to her, slightly out of breath. What just happened in there? Are you okay? Mia let out a shaky, bitter laugh, wiping at her tear-streaked face. Okay? I just got slapped by my husband on my wedding day, in front of everyone. Do I look okay? Camille's expression was a mix of fury and concern. You're not going back in there, right? Not a chance, Mia said firmly. I'm done. With him, with his family, with all of it. Camille nodded. Good, let's get you out of here. Reaching Mia's car, Camille opened the passenger door and motioned for her to get in. I'll drive. You're not in any shape to be behind the wheel. Mia hesitated, then slid into the seat, too drained to argue. As Camille started the car and pulled out of the lot, Mia glanced back at the venue through the rearview mirror. What had once seemed like a dream now looked cold and lifeless. Where to? Camille asked, her voice soft. My place, Mia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't go back to the house, not tonight. Camille nodded, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. Good call. And just so you know, you're staying as long as you need, no arguments. Mia leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, her cheeks still throbbing. Thanks, Camille. The rest of the drive passed in heavy silence, interrupted only by the occasional buzz of Mia's phone. She didn't bother looking at it. She already knew who it was. Daniel, Olivia, maybe even some guests from the wedding. She had no desire to hear their excuses or explanations. When they arrived at Camille's apartment, Camille quickly ushered Mia inside, guiding her to the couch and draping a blanket over her shoulders. Tea? Wine? Something stronger? Tea, please, Mia replied, her voice small and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. As Camille busied herself in the kitchen, Mia stared at her phone, still buzzing with notifications. Finally, she powered it off and set it on the coffee table. She couldn't deal with it, not now. Camille returned with a steaming mug and sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on Mia's shoulder. You're not alone, you know. Whatever you need, I'm here. Mia nodded, but the tears she had held back all evening finally spilled over. I don't know what I'm going to do, she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought today was going to be the start of something beautiful, but it was all a lie. Camille pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. You're stronger than this, Mia. You've always been stronger than this, and you're going to come out of it even stronger. For the first time that night, Mia allowed herself to believe it might be true. Mia let Camille hold her as she sobbed, her tears soaking into her friend's shoulder. "You're stronger than this, Mia," Camille whispered. "You've always been strong, and you're going to come out of this even stronger." The next morning, Mia woke on Camille's couch, still wearing her wedding dress. The sunlight streaming through the window felt harsh and unrelenting. Her body ached from the tension of the day before, and as she moved to sit up, the sting on her cheek reminded her of what had transpired. Catching her reflection in the mirror above the fireplace, she winced at the faint redness on her cheek. "Morning," Camille said, walking in from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a bus," Mia muttered, gratefully accepting the mug. "Well, you're about to feel a little better," Camille said, sitting beside her. "I called your brother Eric. He's on his way over. We're gonna get your things from the house." Mia's stomach churned at the thought. "I don't want to see him or his mother." "You won't have to," Camille assured her. "Eric's bringing the police. They'll make sure everything is handled." The idea of a police escort was both reassuring and humiliating, but Mia knew she couldn't avoid it. Most of her belongings, her wallet, ID, and other essentials, were still at the house she had once thought she'd share with Daniel. By the time Eric arrived, Mia had changed into a pair of Camille's sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, her wedding dress folded neatly into a garment bag. Eric greeted her with a fierce hug, his expression dark with anger. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. "I will be," she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. The drive to the house was tense, with a police cruiser following close behind. As they pulled into the driveway, Mia's heart raced. Daniel's car wasn't there, but Olivia's was, parked conspicuously near the front door. Olivia stepped outside as they approached, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Mia, dear," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You didn't need to bring the police. Daniel isn't even here." "I'm not here for Daniel," Mia said coldly. "I'm here for my things." Olivia's lips tightened as she stepped aside reluctantly, muttering under her breath about overreacting. Mia ignored her, walking into the house flanked by Eric and one of the officers. Inside, Mia moved quickly, gathering her clothes, documents, and sentimental items. Camille trailed behind, snapping photos for documentation. In the living room, Mia froze. A framed photo of her and Daniel from their first vacation together sat on the mantel. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up and placing it face down. Olivia appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're being so dramatic, Mia. This isn't necessary." Mia turned to face her, her voice calm but firm. "What's dramatic is your son hitting me in front of everyone. What's unnecessary is your constant meddling and disrespect. I'm done with all of it." Olivia's face flushed, but she didn't respond. With her belongings packed, Mia walked out of the house without looking back. Back at Camille's apartment, Mia sank onto the couch, a mix of exhaustion and relief washing over her. Eric sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Mia. You're out of there, and you're safe. That's what matters." Mia nodded, though the weight of everything she'd lost still lingered. Her phone buzzed, and when she checked it, her stomach dropped. A video of Daniel slapping her had been uploaded online. It was already gaining traction, with comments pouring in, some supportive, others cruel. Camille leaned over to glance at the screen. "Don't read those," she said firmly. "People are going to have opinions no matter what. Focus on you." Mia powered off her phone and set it aside. She had bigger things to worry about than public opinion. In the days that followed, Mia began the slow process of rebuilding. She met with a lawyer to discuss a restraining order and started looking for a new place to live. The outpouring of support from her family and friends overwhelmed her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Mia sat on Camille's balcony with a journal her mother had gifted her years ago. She hadn't written in it since college, but now felt like the right time. "Today marks the end of a chapter I thought would define my life," she wrote. "Instead, it's the beginning of something new. I've learned that love isn't about sacrifice, it's about respect, and I'll never settle for anything less again." Closing the journal, a small smile crept onto Mia's face. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was hers to rebuild. And she was ready to begin.